I moved into Leo's house because I was broke, exhausted, and one missed paycheck away from sleeping in my car. That sounds dramatic, but at 26, dramatic had kind of become my default setting. The apartment I'd shared with two other guys downtown had turned into a disaster after one of them lost his job, and the other decided rent was more of a group suggestion than an actual responsibility. By the time our landlord started threatening legal action, I packed my clothes into garbage bags and started scrolling through rental listings at 2 in the morning like my life depended on it. That's how I found Leo. Room for rent. Quiet house. Preferably someone responsible. The word responsible alone made me laugh out loud. Still, the price was low enough that I clicked immediately. The house was about 20 minutes outside the city in a neighborhood full of trimmed hedges and parked SUVs. The kind of place where people actually brought their trash bins back inside the same day. I almost turned around before knocking. Not because the place looked bad. The opposite, actually. It looked too stable for someone like me. Then the front door opened. And there he was. Leo. Tall. Broad shoulders. Dark blonde hair, slightly messy like he'd been running his hands through it all day. He wore a faded gray t-shirt and jeans. Casual, but put together in the kind of way that made you immediately aware of your own wrinkled hoodie. He looked older than me by a few years. Mid-30s maybe. And tired. Not physically tired. Life tired. You Justin? He asked. Yeah. He nodded once and stepped aside. Come in. The house smelled like coffee and laundry detergent. Warm. Lived in. There were framed photos on the walls, almost immediately family pictures, vacations, school photos of a little girl with curly hair and a huge smile. I noticed the wedding photos were missing. Divorced, I thought instantly. Like I could somehow feel it sitting in the walls. Leo noticed me looking at the pictures. My daughter, he said. Maya. She's cute. A small smile appeared on his face then. Real enough that it changed him completely for a second. Yeah, he said quietly. She knows it too. He showed me the room upstairs. Small but clean. Big window. Actual bed frame instead of a mattress on the floor, which already put it above 90% of the places I'd toured that week. The bathroom's across the hall, he explained. Kitchen's yours too. Just clean up after yourself. Sounds fair. He leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. So, he said, you got a job? Graphic design, I replied. Remote mostly. That real work or fake laptop work? I laughed before I could stop myself. That earned me another tiny smile. Fake laptop work, I admitted. Honesty. Good start. There was something strange about him. Not intimidating exactly. Just contained. Like every emotion, he had stayed locked 3 inches beneath the surface. I should tell you, he added after a moment. My daughter stays here every other week. No problem. And I'm usually up early. I can survive that. He nodded slowly, studying me in a way that made me weirdly aware of myself. Not uncomfortable. Just seen. You drink a lot? He asked suddenly. What? I had a tenant before you, he explained. Guy turned my garage into a brewery and cried in my kitchen twice a week about cryptocurrency. I snorted. So that's a yes on alcohol screening? That's a yes on me liking peace and quiet. Then no, I said. I'm pretty boring. His eyes flicked over me once. You don't seem boring. The air shifted slightly. Not flirting. At least I didn't think it was. But something definitely changed. Then footsteps pounded down the hallway upstairs. A second later, a little girl flew around the corner wearing mismatched socks and holding a stuffed dinosaur. Dad, where's my? She stopped dead when she saw me. Leo sighed. Justin, this is Maya. Maya, this is Justin. He might be renting the upstairs room. She narrowed her eyes suspiciously. Do you play Mario Kart? I blinked. Yeah. Okay, she said seriously. You can stay. Leo rubbed a hand over his face like this happened often. And for some reason, watching him stand there, tired dad energy, quiet voice, trying not to smile at his daughter's interrogation did something weird to my chest. Something warm. Something dangerous. I should have recognized it immediately. Because moving into Leo's house was supposed to solve my financial problems. Instead, it became the beginning of every problem I didn't know I was about to have. By the end of the first week living there, I realized 2 things. First, Maya was absolutely terrifying at Mario Kart. Second, Leo barely slept. I noticed it accidentally. My room was right above the kitchen, and almost every night around 2 or 3 in the morning, I'd hear soft footsteps downstairs. Cabinet doors opening. The coffee machine humming. At first I figured he just worked early. Then one night, I went downstairs for water and found him sitting alone at the kitchen table in the dark. Not fully dark, the light above the stove was on, but dim enough that the whole room felt quiet and heavy. He looked up immediately when he heard me. "Sorry," I said. "Didn't mean to scare you." "You didn't." His voice sounded rough. "Tired." I grabbed a glass from the cabinet slowly, trying not to make it weird. But something about seeing him there alone at 3 in the morning made the house suddenly feel different. Smaller somehow. "You always awake this late?" I asked carefully. Leo leaned back slightly in his chair. "Usually." "Insomnia?" He gave a short laugh without humor. "Something like that." There was a mug in front of him, untouched coffee gone cold. His laptop sat open beside it with what looked like spreadsheets on the screen. "You working?" "Trying to." "You should probably sleep instead." His eyes lifted to mine then, and for a second, something unreadable passed across his face. "You sound like my therapist." "You have a therapist?" "No," he replied. "Could probably use one, though." That made me smile. He noticed. I could tell because the corner of his mouth twitched like he was fighting one back. The silence after that wasn't awkward exactly. Just quiet. Comfortable quiet. Which was strange considering I'd known him less than a week. "You hungry?" he asked suddenly. "At 3 in the morning? Best time for bad decisions." 10 minutes later, we were standing in the kitchen making grilled cheese sandwiches like exhausted, divorced fathers who'd lost custody of their children. Well, he looked like one. I looked like the guy who still forgot laundry in the washer for 2 days. Leo cooked automatically, efficiently, like someone who'd spent years taking care of other people before himself. "You do this every night?" I asked. "Exist in the dark?" "Pretty much." "No. I nodded toward the stove. "You cook when you can't sleep?" "Better than staring at the ceiling." That answer sat with me longer than it should have. When the sandwiches were done, we sat across from each other at the kitchen island, eating in silence. I kept catching myself looking at him. Not intentionally, just noticing things. The tiredness around his eyes. The faint stubble along his jaw. The way he loosened up slightly when Maya wasn't around, like he carried less weight for a few hours. "So," he said eventually, "what's your deal?" "My deal? You moved into a stranger's house with 2 garbage bags full of clothes," he said. "There's always a story." I laughed softly. "That obvious?" "A little." I hesitated. Not because my story was tragic. It wasn't. Just embarrassing. "My roommates," I admitted. "Money got tight. Needed somewhere cheap before everything collapsed." Leo nodded slowly like he understood more than I said out loud. "You got family around?" "Not really." That wasn't entirely true. But explaining my relationship with my parents always felt exhausting. "What about you?" I asked carefully. His eyes flicked toward the hallway where Maya's drawings were taped crookedly to the wall. "What about me?" "The divorced dad thing." That actually made him laugh. A real laugh this time. "Divorced dad thing? You have strong divorced dad energy." Jesus Christ. It's the nighttime kitchen sadness. He shook his head, smiling into his coffee now. 7 years married, he said finally. 2 years divorced. I nodded quietly. "You okay?" I asked before I could stop myself. The question slipped out naturally. Too naturally. Leo looked surprised by it too. Then his expression softened in a way I hadn't seen before. "Most days," he answered honestly. And there it was again. That dangerous warmth in my chest. Because I understood that tone. The one people use when they're surviving instead of living. I knew it because I'd sounded exactly like that for most of my 20s. After that night, something shifted between us. Not dramatically, just enough to notice. Leo started lingering in conversations longer instead of disappearing into his office after dinner. Sometimes he'd ask about my work. Sometimes I'd help Maya with homework while he cooked. And slowly, the house stopped feeling temporary. It started feeling safe. Which was the problem? One Friday evening, Maya was at her mom's place, and Leo came home looking exhausted enough to physically collapse. He loosened his tie walking through the door. I looked up from the couch. Bad day. Bad week. He dropped his keys onto the counter and stood there rubbing his eyes for a second. Then he noticed the takeout containers on the coffee table. "You order food?" Figured fake laptop workers deserve luxury sometimes. He huffed a tired laugh. "Did you get enough for 2? "Depends. You gonna judge my order?" "I'm already judging it." 20 minutes later, we were sitting side by side on the couch eating noodles straight from the cartons while some terrible reality show played in the background. It felt weirdly domestic. Dangerously domestic. At one point, Leo leaned back, head resting against the couch cushion, and closed his eyes for a second. You falling asleep? I asked. Maybe. You're like 80 years old. MHM. You should stretch before bed. His eyes opened slowly. You always talk this much. Only when I'm nervous. The second the words left my mouth, I wanted them back. Leo looked at me carefully. Nervous? He repeated. I shrugged quickly, trying to play it off. You're intimidating sometimes. That's probably the first time anyone's ever called me intimidating while I'm holding lo mein. I laughed, but my chest suddenly felt tight. Because now he was looking at me differently. More directly. And I couldn't tell if I imagined it or not. The room went quiet except for the TV. Then Leo said softly, You don't seem nervous around me. I swallowed. That's because I'm trying very hard. Something shifted again. Subtle, but real. And for the first time since moving in, I had a terrifying thought. Maybe I wasn't the only one feeling it. The first time I caught myself thinking about Leo in a way I absolutely should not have been thinking about him. He was standing barefoot in the kitchen arguing with Maya about pancakes. That was it. No dramatic moment. No touching. No lingering eye contact. Just him standing there on a Sunday morning in gray sweatpants while his daughter accused him of emotional sabotage because he'd burned one pancake slightly. You're being dramatic, Leo told her. You made it crunchy. It's one pancake. It was my pancake. I sat at the counter drinking coffee, trying very hard not to smile. Maya pointed at me suddenly. Justin understands me. Oh, Justin understands you. Leo asked dryly. Yes. She manipulated you fast, he informed me. She's 9, I said. She's dangerous. Maya grinned proudly like that was a compliment. Leo finally looked over at me then. And there it was again, that look he'd started giving me lately. Soft around the edges. Like he forgot himself for half a second whenever he looked too long. It hit me straight in the chest. Which was bad. Very bad. Because Leo wasn't just my landlord anymore. He was becoming part of my routine. Morning coffee together. Late-night conversations in the kitchen. Watching movies with Maya sprawled dramatically across both of us like she legally owned the couch. And somewhere inside all of that, my brain had apparently decided to betray me. The worst part? I genuinely couldn't tell if Leo felt it too. Sometimes I thought I imagined everything. Then moments happened. Small moments. Like him resting his hand lightly against my back when squeezing past me in the kitchen. Or the way his eyes found me first whenever something funny happened. Or how he started staying downstairs longer at night if I was there. Tiny things. But tiny things become dangerous when you start collecting them. One night, about 3 weeks after I moved in, Maya was asleep upstairs and Leo and I were sitting outside on the back porch. It was cold enough that our breath fogged faintly in the air. Leo had a beer balanced against his knee, looking unusually relaxed for once. You know, I said, I think your daughter might secretly run this house. She openly runs this house. That's fair. He smiled quietly. The porch light cast soft shadows across his face, and suddenly I became painfully aware of how close we were sitting. Not touching, just close enough to notice. You ever regret it? I asked before I could stop myself. His brow furrowed slightly. Regret what? Marriage. The question hung there for a second. Leo stared out into the yard. No, he said finally. Not really. I nodded slowly. She's a good mom, he added. We just stopped making each other happy. There was no bitterness in his voice. That somehow made it sadder. You still love her? I asked quietly. Leo looked at me then, long enough that my pulse immediately sped up. I care about her, he said carefully. But not like that anymore. Something complicated twisted inside my chest. Because I hated how relieved that answer made me feel. Leo took another sip of his beer before speaking again. What about you? What about me? You ever been in love? I laughed softly. That sounds dangerous. Probably is. I looked down at my hands. Yeah, I admitted eventually. Once. He stayed quiet, waiting. It didn't end dramatically or anything. I continued. I think we just wanted different versions of each other. Leo nodded slowly like he understood exactly what that meant. That's usually how it happens, he said. The conversation should have stayed normal after that. Instead, the silence changed. Heavy, warm, too aware. I could feel him looking at me now. And when I finally glanced over, his eyes were already on mine. Neither of us moved. The air between us felt strangely tight. Then Leo said quietly, You know what the problem with you is? I blinked. That sounds hostile. You make this place feel less empty. My heart stuttered so hard it actually hurt. I stared at him. Leo looked almost surprised at himself, too, like the words slipped out before he could stop them. Neither of us spoke. Then suddenly the back door opened upstairs. "Dad!" Maya yelled from inside the house. I threw up. Leo shot to his feet immediately. And just like that, the moment shattered. He disappeared inside without another word. I sat frozen on the porch alone, heart pounding violently against my ribs. Because for one terrifying second out there, it hadn't felt one-sided at all. And I had absolutely no idea what to do about that. After the porch conversation, everything got weird. Not bad weird. Worse. Careful weird. Leo avoided being alone with me for almost 2 days after Maya's midnight disaster. Not obviously. He still talked to me. Still asked if I wanted coffee in the morning. Still existed in the same spaces. But there was distance now. Intentional distance. And the problem was, I understood why. Because I felt it too. Every interaction suddenly carried awareness underneath it. When his hand brushed mine passing me a plate, we both noticed. When our eyes met across the kitchen, neither of us held the look as long anymore. Even Maya picked up on it. "You guys are acting strange," she announced during dinner on Tuesday. Leo nearly choked on his water. "I have no idea what you mean," he said immediately. "You're both doing the face." I frowned. "What face?" "The weird, quiet face." "That's not a thing." "It is," she said confidently. "Mom does it before taxes." Leo rubbed a hand over his mouth like he was trying not to laugh. "Eat your broccoli," he muttered. Maya narrowed her eyes suspiciously at both of us. I escaped upstairs immediately after dinner before my heartbeat physically exploded out of my chest. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 1 in the morning, I heard movement downstairs again. Leo. Somehow I already knew. I stared at my ceiling for a solid 30 seconds, debating whether going downstairs was a terrible idea. It absolutely was. I went anyway. The kitchen light was dim when I walked in. Leo stood at the counter pouring coffee into a mug, even though it was literally 1:30 in the morning. He glanced up immediately when he heard me. For 1 second, neither of us spoke. Then he sighed softly. "Can't sleep either?" There was something almost relieved in his voice. "Guess not." I leaned against the opposite counter, trying to ignore how unfairly attractive he looked, exhausted and half awake. Silence settled between us again. But unlike the porch, this silence felt tense. Like both of us were standing too close to something dangerous. Leo finally broke first. "I'm sorry about the other night." My chest tightened instantly. "For Maya throwing up?" A faint smile tugged at his mouth. "No." "Oh." He looked down at his coffee mug. "I shouldn't have said that to you." "You mean the less empty thing?" "Yeah." I swallowed hard. Didn't seem untrue. That made him look up fast. The second our eyes locked, the entire room shifted again. God, there it was. That feeling. The one neither of us wanted to name. Leo exhaled slowly through his nose. "Justin," he said carefully, "you live here. That's generally how renting works. You know what I mean." I did. He ran a hand through his hair, visibly frustrated now, not at me. At himself. "I'm trying very hard to be responsible," he admitted quietly. The honesty in his voice hit me harder than it should have. Because suddenly this wasn't just attraction anymore. It was restraint. And restraint only exists when someone wants something. "You think I'm irresponsible?" I asked softly. His eyes snapped to mine immediately. "No." "Then what's the problem?" He stared at me for a long moment. "You're younger than me. I have a daughter. You're living in my house. I'm still figuring out my life after my marriage falling apart." Each sentence sounded like something he'd repeated to himself already. Like he'd been trying to build a wall out of logic. "And?" I asked quietly. Leo laughed once under his breath. "And none of that changes the fact that every time you walk into a room lately, I notice. The air left my lungs. Completely." He looked almost angry at himself after saying it out loud. But I couldn't breathe properly anymore, because there it was. Finally. The truth. Neither of us moved. I became hyper-aware of everything. The refrigerator humming softly. The coffee smell in the air. The way Leo's fingers tightened around his mug. "You know what the smart thing would be?" he asked quietly. "What?" "You finding another place eventually." That hurt more than I expected. I tried not to show it. "Do you want me to leave?" His answer came too fast. "No." The word landed heavily between us. Leo closed his eyes briefly afterward, like he regretted how honest that sounded. Then, quieter. "That's the problem." My chest physically ached now. Because he wasn't rejecting me. He was scared of wanting me. And somehow that felt even worse. I took a slow breath. "Leo, He looked at me again. Tired. Guarded. Too open all at once. You don't have to pretend nothing's happening, I said softly. Something in his expression cracked a little at that. I know, he admitted. The silence afterward stretched painfully long. Then footsteps suddenly echoed upstairs. Maya. Both of us jerked apart instinctively, even though we hadn't even been touching. Dad? Her sleepy voice called. Leo cleared his throat immediately. Kitchen. A second later, Maya shuffled into the room, holding her blanket. She looked at both of us suspiciously. You're doing the weird face again. I nearly laughed from pure panic. Leo looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. And somehow, standing there at nearly 2 in the morning with his half-asleep daughter judging us both, I realized something terrifying. I was already in way too deep. The next week felt like living inside a thunderstorm that never fully broke. Nothing happened, which somehow made everything more intense. Leo and I became painfully aware of each other in every room of the house. Every conversation felt loaded now, even when it was about completely normal things. Can you grab the pasta sauce? Yeah. Thanks. And somehow both of us sounded like we were discussing state secrets. It was ridiculous. Maya noticed immediately. You guys are still weird, she informed us Thursday night while doing homework at the kitchen table. Leo sighed. Please define weird. You keep staring at each other and then pretending you weren't. I nearly inhaled my drink wrong. Leo looked genuinely horrified. Nobody's staring at anybody, he said too quickly. Maya looked at him with the exhausted expression of someone raising a deeply disappointing adult. Dad, she said slowly, I'm 9. Not stupid. I had to physically bite the inside of my cheek to stop myself from laughing. Leo pointed at her worksheet immediately. Math. That's emotional avoidance. Math. She grinned smugly and went back to her homework. I escaped upstairs 5 minutes later because I genuinely thought I might die. The problem was that Maya wasn't wrong. We were staring. Constantly. And the longer nothing happened, the harder it became to ignore. A few nights later, Leo and I ended up alone again after Maya went to sleep. I was sitting on the living room floor building some impossible Lego dinosaur, because apparently that's what happened when a child took over your home. Leo walked in from the kitchen carrying 2 beers. He stopped when he saw me surrounded by tiny plastic pieces. The hell is that? Emotional suffering. He laughed softly and handed me one of the beers before sitting down on the couch behind me. You know you're allowed to quit. No, I replied seriously. Maya believes in me. That kid believes raccoons understand human language. She might be onto something. I heard him smiling behind me. The TV played quietly in the background while I struggled through the instructions. For a while, things actually felt normal again. Easy. Then Leo spoke. You've been avoiding me. I froze slightly. No, I haven't. You went upstairs immediately after dinner yesterday. You burned garlic bread. I needed space. That's fair. I smiled despite myself. Then silence settled again. Heavy this time. I could feel him looking at me without turning around. You know what I think? He asked quietly. What? I think we're both trying very hard not to make this worse. My chest tightened instantly. I carefully set the Lego piece down in my hand. And is it working? Leo was quiet for a second too long. No, he admitted. I finally turned around then. Big mistake. He looked exhausted again. Open again. Too honest. The couch light cast soft shadows across his face, and suddenly the room felt way too small. I don't know how to do this, he said quietly. Do what? This part. The talking part. The wanting something I probably shouldn't want part. Every nerve ending in my body lit up at once. Neither of us moved. I became aware of my own heartbeat again. Fast. Too fast. Leo. He rubbed a hand over his face slowly. You know what really? He asked softly. I was doing okay before you moved in. I blinked. Wow. Rude. That got a quiet laugh out of him. Then his expression softened immediately afterward. I mean it, he admitted. Everything was simpler. Are you saying I ruined your life? I'm saying you walked into my house and suddenly it stopped feeling empty all the time. God, there was that sentence again. That feeling. Warm and terrifying and impossible to ignore. I stood up slowly from the floor before my legs forgot how to function entirely. Leo looked up at me immediately, and suddenly we were too close. Not touching, just close enough that I could see the exhaustion in his eyes clearly now. You know what the worst part is? I asked quietly. What? I think I'd let you break my heart anyway. The second the words left my mouth, the air changed completely. Leo stared at me like I'd knocked the breath out of him. Justin, His voice sounded rough now. Dangerously rough. Neither of us moved. I could feel the tension between us physically at this point. Then slowly, carefully, Leo stood up too. Now there was almost no space left between us. Every logical thought in my brain started screaming immediately. Bad idea. Terrible idea. Catastrophic idea. But Leo was looking at me like he felt it too. Like he was losing the fight against himself inch by inch. You should go upstairs, he said quietly. I swallowed hard. Probably. Neither of us moved. Leo let out one shaky breath and closed his eyes briefly like he was trying to regain control of himself. Then, softly, Justin, if you keep looking at me like that, I'm gonna do something irresponsible. My heart nearly stopped. And before I could answer, Dad, Maya's sleepy voice echoed from upstairs. We jumped apart so fast it was honestly embarrassing. Leo turned immediately toward the staircase. Yeah, I had a bad dream. The moment shattered instantly. Leo looked back at me one last time before heading upstairs. And the expression on his face right before he disappeared completely destroyed me. Because it wasn't regret. It was restraint. After Maya's nightmare interrupted whatever almost happened in the living room, Leo started avoiding being alone with me completely. And honestly, that hurt more than I expected. Not because I thought he owed me something, but because now I knew. I knew he felt it too, which meant every moment of distance afterward felt intentional, calculated, like he was trying to put the feelings back into a locked box before they got worse. The problem was, it was already worse. For both of us. The house changed after that night. Not visibly. Maya still ran through the hallway yelling about cartoons. Leo still made coffee too early in the morning. I still worked upstairs pretending my life wasn't slowly imploding. But underneath all of it, tension sat quietly in every room. And the worst part? We were both trying to act normal for Maya, which only made us more obvious. One Saturday afternoon, Maya was sprawled across the living room rug coloring while Leo fixed something under the kitchen sink. I was trying to answer emails from the couch when Maya suddenly looked up at me. You like my dad? My soul left my body instantly. What? She nodded seriously. And he likes you. From underneath the sink, I heard Leo slam his head directly into plumbing. Jesus Christ, he muttered. Maya frowned toward the kitchen. Dad said a swear. I heard it too, I whispered weakly. Leo emerged a second later, looking genuinely traumatized. Maya, he said carefully. Where is this coming from? She shrugged casually. You do the face. The face isn't a thing, he replied immediately. It's extremely a thing, she informed him. I was seconds away from passing out. Leo looked at me over her head with the exhausted expression of a man actively losing a fight against his own life. Then Maya added, You should just date already. Silence. Absolute silence. Leo stared at his daughter. I stared at the floor. The universe stared directly into my soul and laughed. Maya, Leo said slowly, Justin rents a room here. And adults don't just randomly start dating people. I risked glancing up then. Big mistake. Because Leo was already looking at me. And suddenly the room felt way too warm again. Maya rolled her eyes dramatically. That's literally how dating works. I'm begging you to stop talking. No. I laughed before I could stop myself. Leo looked over at me immediately, and for one dangerous second we both cracked. Just slightly. But enough. Enough that Maya pointed aggressively between us. See. Leo covered his face with one hand. I'm being bullied in my own home. You're being obvious in your own home, Maya corrected. Then she casually returned to coloring like she hadn't just detonated both our nervous systems. That night after she went to sleep, the house felt unusually quiet. I stayed upstairs intentionally, mostly because I didn't trust myself anymore. Around midnight, I heard soft footsteps outside my door. Not passing by. Stopping. My heart immediately started pounding. Then came a quiet knock. 3 soft taps. I stared at the door for a second before opening it. Leo stood there looking exhausted and nervous, which somehow affected me more than anything else so far. Hey, he said quietly. Hey. Neither of us moved. The hallway light behind him cast shadows across his face, and suddenly I became painfully aware that this was the first time he'd come to me directly instead of accidentally ending up near me. I think my daughter's smarter than both of us, he admitted. I laughed softly despite myself. Yeah, probably. He looked down briefly before meeting my eyes again. I don't like avoiding you. The honesty in his voice physically hurt. You're trying to do the right thing, I said quietly. What if I'm tired of the right thing? The air left my lungs immediately. Leo leaned lightly against the doorway now, visibly fighting with himself. You know what I've been doing all week? He asked softly. What? Trying to convince myself this is just loneliness. My chest tightened painfully, and his eyes locked onto mine fully then. It's not. Neither of us spoke after that. We didn't need to. Everything was already sitting there between us. Warm, dangerous, real. I should probably go downstairs, he said eventually. Probably. He didn't move. Neither did I. The hallway suddenly felt impossibly small. Justin, he said quietly, tell me to stop. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Because the terrifying truth was I didn't want him to stop at all. Leo saw the answer on my face immediately. His expression shifted then. Not relieved. Not triumphant. Just honest. Like he was finally too tired to pretend he didn't want this. Slowly, carefully, he stepped closer. And when he lifted his hand toward my face, he hesitated halfway there, giving me space to pull away. I didn't. His fingers brushed lightly against my jaw. That tiny bit of contact hit me harder than anything else had so far. God, he murmured softly, almost to himself. This is such a bad idea. Probably, I whispered. But neither of us sounded convincing anymore. For a long second, we just stood there breathing the same air. Then Leo leaned forward slightly and stopped himself. Barely. His forehead rested against mine instead. I closed my eyes instantly. Everything inside me felt unsteady now. You have no idea how hard I'm trying right now, he admitted quietly. I think my heart actually broke a little hearing that. Because restraint sounds romantic until you realize how much someone has to want you for it to hurt them like that. Leo, he exhaled shakily. Then finally, he tilted his head just enough and kissed me. Soft, careful, like he was still afraid even while doing it. The second it happened, every thought in my head disappeared completely. There was no dramatic rush, no fireworks, just warmth, and the overwhelming realization that this had been building between us for weeks. When he pulled back, neither of us spoke immediately. Leo looked almost stunned by himself. I probably looked the same. Then quietly, like the words cost him something. I really needed not to want you this much. And honestly, that might have been the moment I fell completely in love with him. The kiss changed everything. And somehow nothing. That was the strangest part. The next morning, Maya still complained about cereal. Leo still burned toast because he got distracted answering work emails. I still sat at the kitchen counter pretending my entire internal structure hadn't collapsed overnight. But now every glance carried memory behind it. Every silence felt charged. And every time Leo looked at me, I remembered exactly how carefully he'd kissed me in the hallway. Like he'd been holding himself back for weeks. Which, apparently, he had. The worst part? He seemed calmer afterward. Not less affected. Just settled. Like finally crossing the line had stopped whatever war he'd been fighting with himself. I, meanwhile, was seconds away from cardiac arrest every time he entered a room. You look tired, he told me casually while pouring coffee. I stared at him over my mug. You ruined my emotional stability. That seems dramatic. You kissed me in a hallway at midnight. That's fair. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly. God, that tiny almost smile was becoming dangerous to my health. Maya wandered into the kitchen a second later carrying her backpack. She looked between both of us immediately, then narrowed her eyes. Oh my God, Leo nearly dropped the coffee pot. What? He asked too fast. You stopped doing the weird face. I physically turned away because laughing would absolutely expose us. Maya pointed at both of us accusingly. You did date already. We are not discussing this before school, Leo replied instantly. Her jaw dropped dramatically. I knew it. Leo looked genuinely betrayed by the universe. Maya, no way, no way. She looked delighted. This is the best thing that's ever happened to me. This should concern me more than it does, I muttered. Leo rubbed a hand over his face while Maya celebrated like she'd personally solved world peace. The terrifying thing was, Leo wasn't denying it. Not really. And somehow that mattered more than the kiss itself. Because for the first time since all this started, he wasn't trying to run from it anymore. After Maya left for school, the house fell quiet again. Leo leaned against the counter, exhaling slowly. Well, he said, that could have gone worse. She's planning our wedding mentally. She planned your funeral when you beat her at Mario Kart. That kid holds grudges. Leo laughed softly. Then his eyes met mine again, and the air shifted instantly. There it was. That awareness. That pull. Except now neither of us could pretend it wasn't real. You okay? he asked quietly. The question sounded bigger than the words themselves. I swallowed. Are you? He considered that honestly. No, he admitted. But maybe in a good way. My chest tightened painfully. Because that was exactly how I felt too. Leo walked toward me slowly then, stopping close enough that my pulse immediately started acting stupid again. You know what scares me? He asked softly. What? That this already feels important. The honesty in his voice nearly wrecked me. I looked down briefly because suddenly breathing felt complicated. Leo, I mean it, he continued quietly. I spent 2 years after my divorce convincing myself I was done needing people this much. I looked back up. His expression was completely open now. No walls. No avoidance. No pretending. And then you showed up with garbage bags full of clothes and started making grilled cheese in my kitchen at 3 in the morning. I laughed softly despite the ache in my chest. You forgot the emotional support Lego dinosaur. That thing still haunts me. The silence after that turned warm instead of tense. Comfortable. Dangerously comfortable. Then Leo lifted his hand slowly and brushed his fingers lightly against mine. Tiny contact, but intentional this time. No hesitation. You know we should probably talk about this responsibly, he murmured. Probably. Boundaries. Timing. Living arrangements. Very mature, I agreed quietly. Extremely mature. Neither of us sounded convincing at all. Leo's thumb brushed lightly against my hand once. And God help me, that tiny gesture felt more intimate than the kiss somehow. Because it wasn't restraint anymore. It was choice. Then his phone rang. Leo closed his eyes immediately like the universe personally hated him. I laughed quietly while he pulled the phone from his pocket. His expression shifted when he saw the screen. Everything okay? I asked softly. He nodded once. Maya's mom. Something complicated moved through me instantly. Not jealousy exactly. Just reality. Because this wasn't simple. Leo answered the call quietly and stepped toward the living room. I turned back toward the kitchen window, trying to slow my heartbeat again. And that's when it hit me fully for the first time. This wasn't just attraction anymore. Somewhere between late-night coffee, hallway kisses, and Maya exposing our entire emotional situation before breakfast. Leo had become home to me, which was terrifying. Because homes are the things that hurt the most when you lose them. Things became real after that. Not because we kissed. Not because Maya basically adopted me into her long-term life plan against our will. But because Leo stopped acting like what existed between us was temporary. That changed everything. He started touching me casually in passing without immediately pulling away afterward. A hand against my shoulder while reaching around me in the kitchen. Fingers brushing mine when handing me coffee. Small things. But small things matter when someone spent weeks trying not to touch you at all. And slowly, the fear inside the house started fading. Not disappearing completely, just softening. One night about 2 weeks later, Maya was asleep upstairs and Leo and I were sitting on the couch together watching some terrible action movie neither of us cared about. At some point, without even thinking about it, I leaned against him slightly. Leo went still for half a second, then relaxed immediately after. His arms settled around me naturally, like we'd done this 100 times before. The quiet nearly destroyed me. Because there was no panic anymore. No tension. Just warmth. You know what's weird? I murmured quietly. What? This feels weirdly normal. Leo looked down at me. That's because it is. The simplicity of his answer hit harder than anything dramatic could have. I tilted my head back against the couch, studying him for a second. You really scared me for a while there. His mouth twitched slightly. Me too. No, I mean emotionally. That's also me. I laughed softly. Then Leo's expression shifted into something more serious. I need you to know something, he said quietly. The tone immediately made my chest tighten. What? This isn't temporary for me. I stared at him. Leo held my gaze steadily now. I know the timing's messy, he continued. And the living situation's messy. And honestly, my entire life still feels kind of messy sometimes. I stayed quiet. But I'm not doing this halfway, he said firmly. Not with you. God. I think something inside me melted permanently hearing that. Because Leo never spoke dramatically. Never overpromised. Never used pretty words just to sound good. Which meant when he said something honest, you felt it immediately. You know, I said softly. For someone who spent weeks avoiding eye contact, this is emotionally aggressive. That got a real laugh out of him. Then quieter. You make me want things again. The air left my lungs slowly. Leo looked almost surprised by his own honesty again, but he didn't take the words back. I forgot what that felt like, he admitted. After the divorce, everything became about survival. Work, Maya, paying bills, keeping life moving. His fingers brushed lightly against my arm absent-mindedly while he spoke. Then you showed up, and suddenly the house felt alive again. I swallowed hard. Leo, I'm serious, he said softly. Maya smiles more when you're around. I sleep better. I laugh more. He shook his head slightly. You have no idea what you did to this place. The emotion in his voice nearly wrecked me completely, because nobody had ever said something like that to me before. Not like they meant it. I looked down for a second, trying to steady myself. Then quietly, you did the same thing to me. Leo's expression softened immediately. He leaned down slowly, resting his forehead against mine the same way he had in the hallway that night. Only this time there was no hesitation, no fear, just us. You know, he murmured softly. Maya's going to become unbearable now. She already is. She told me yesterday she manifested this relationship. I laughed so hard I nearly ruined the moment entirely. Leo smiled against my forehead, and suddenly the house didn't feel tense anymore. It felt full, warm, safe, real. A few months earlier, I'd shown up carrying garbage bags full of clothes, convinced I was just trying to survive another financial disaster. Instead, somehow, I found this. Late-night coffee, shared silence, a little girl who interrogated people through Mario Kart, and a man who looked at me like coming home didn't have to feel lonely anymore. The funny thing is, nothing about it went according to plan. But maybe that was the point, because the best things that ever happened to me never arrived neatly. They showed up quietly, like a knock on the door, like someone sitting beside you in the dark kitchen at 3 in the morning, like a divorced father accidentally becoming the center of your entire life before either of you realized what was happening. And honestly, I'd never been happier that things went completely wrong.